intense love for God, describing him as a rock, a fortress, a shield, and a horn of his salvation. These names illustrate that he saw God as an unshakable presence in his life, a defense that couldn't be penetrated, and he relates that he felt trapped by the cords of death, the torments of destruction, yet he cried out to God who hears him from his heavenly temple. Now, what was he talking about when he talks about the cords of death and the torments of destruction? I wonder, was he talking about when he faced a lion as a shepherd? I wonder if that's also when he was facing Goliath with a slingshot, if it seemed that it could be game over. And was it when King Saul was hunting him and hunting him to kill him? And then there's the other side. Was he feeling trapped when Nathan, God's prophet, rebuked him for murder and for adultery? Throughout his life, David repeatedly returned to God for help and defense, whether it was because of enemies or because of sin and failure. He came to God and saw him as a fortress and a shield and a horn of salvation. Now, there seems to be quite a number of pastors here this morning. And with the pastors here, I'm sure that you know that the horn of salvation is a biblical metaphor to describe God and later Jesus as a source of invincible power, protection, and victory. And this comes from the ancient Near East animals' horns, where the ultimate symbol of strength and might and authority. An animal like bulls or rams or oxen would use their horns as weapons against enemies, and they would also use them to protect their young. Calling God a horn of salvation means he is a powerful, active defender, and he defends from enemies, but he also rescues those who cannot save themselves, whether it's an enemy or whether it's sins. He rescues those if their sins are great or if they're small. And we're going to turn now to our Old Testament lesson, and I pronounce it as Job. And Job was suffering. And there was this huge question about why he was suffering, because if you remember, things had gone very wrong for him. And there was the question why, and there's always kind of the question why when things go wrong. People say, well, why would that need to happen? And for Job, his friends said, well, you know, you must have sinned, so curse God and die. And he said, no, I didn't. And he couldn't explain, but there was all this questions about why he had all this suffering. And so God came to him to talk to him. And he confronted Job with the things that Job could not do and could not understand. And he highlighted the difference between human and divine understanding. And God said to him, okay, were you there? when at creation? Tell me about this. Tell me about that. And Job couldn't answer. But he revealed to Job enough of his character and power that he, as the creator of heaven and earth, can be trusted. And you may not ever get an answer to why. But what you do is you trust God. And David, if we compare the two, David could claim, well, God's been there for me. He's helped me with enemies. He's helped me with my great sin. He's there for me. And Job, his was to trust. There was no answer why, but he was to trust. And his suffering continued. The cords of death had robbed him of his family. His families have come together and they were killed. The torments of destruction had taken all his wealth away. He was a wealthy man, and that was robbed, taken away. And his health was ripped away from him too. But Job did not give up on God. And that's the value of Job, in that he teaches us no matter whether it is continuing, whatever, we trust God. And we say sometimes God gives us blessing and sometimes he gives us pain. And we trust, whether it's pain or whether it's blessing. And indirectly, he is always blessing us, but we may not see it. And we turn to the gospel lesson because here we have a profound message about trusting God in life's unexpected storms, conquering fear and recognizing Jesus' divine identity as the Son of God. Trusting God is easy to say, especially at church. It's so easy to talk about, yes, we trust God. And yes, we talk about it through the word and prayer and liturgy and creeds and communion participation. But you know, the Sunday worship is only a tiny part of our everyday life. And when you were called to trust God outside of church, because being tested is usually not in the church building. You probably are not going to get tested here today. Well, you're tested because you've got this old person and can you make it through. But beyond that, wherever you are, storms of life can come and they can terrify. And they can come where you don't have any answers and maybe you don't have hope. So what we have is the disciples who were told by Jesus, take the boat and go ahead. And so they did. And he stayed behind and he prayed and he said, I'll catch up. But when they went, they kind of forgot about him because they had a terrible time. The wind and the waves were kind of keeping them from making any progress. And it continued on until right through the night. And through the night, early morning, Jesus comes walking, catching up to them, walking on the water. And they cry out, but it's the ghost. And he says, take heart, take courage. It's me. It's all right. And Peter is the only one who calls out. He says, well, if it's you, Lord, tell me to come to you. And he says, come. And Peter gets out of the boat and he walks and he's almost to Jesus. But then he looks at the wind, maybe the waves. He takes his eyes off of Jesus and he begins to sink. And he cries, Lord, help me. And Jesus gives him a hand, pulls him up and said, Why did you doubt? You know, you, you have to have more faith. You have little faith, you've got to have more. You've got to trust. You've got to trust when you're sinking. You've got to trust when you're suffering. Now, that kind of shows us that often that's what happens to us when we're in trouble, when we're sinking, when it's cancer, when it's all of these things we don't want. What happens is we get looking at those things and we take our eyes off of God and we forget that we're not alone, that we are not alone, although it may seem like it, and it's not hopeless. God is there for us to trust. And Jesus isn't condemning Peter. He's trying to encourage him. You know, just hang on. Just keep focused on me. Now, I wonder if you feel that Jesus truly is the Son of God, because it's so easy to say these things, but do we really believe that we have our hearts set on the very Son of God who is able to help us? Help us when it doesn't look good. Help us when we're in trouble. Now, we can't always be fearless. We can't always be in control. Things will upset us. Yes, we will forget about God because we're so upset, we're hurting, whatever. That's going to happen. But we need to be like David. David, when he got in trouble, whether it was enemies or in his life for sin, he went to God. And that's what he called out to God in trouble, and that's what we need to keep doing. And the more trouble it is, we keep calling out and trusting that God's going to help us. Now, one of the most difficult times, I believe, for us to keep trusting is if a loved one dies unexpectedly. That kind of tears our heart out because all of a sudden someone we loved is taken from us. And the reason that we're singing the hymn Precious Lord, Take My Hand, is because I love the true story on it. It's the author, Thomas Dorsey, was a very talented musician, and he was noted for songwriting. And it wasn't so much that you knew him so much for his music, but the songs that other people were singing were famous. And part of the songwriting he did was gospel hymns. His father was a pastor, and he came from a big family, and his journey in faith was partly cemented when this awful thing happened. He was away uh, playing music, and he received word that his wife Nettie, who was pregnant with their first child, had gone into labor and died. There he was, devastated to know that she had died. And the baby, though, was still alive, and he rushed home. And when he got home the next day, they told him the baby had died during the night. So he was absolutely devastated. He was 33 years old. It was 1935, and he needed to prepare because they would do a service of mourning in that week, and he was to speak and to be part of it. And he was devastated, and he could not get any comfort, and the service kept coming closer and closer, and he just was broken. And he sat down at the piano, and he was weak, and he was worn, and he was tired, he was broken, and God helped him. He gave him not only the music, but the words. And it's not just the words about his wife, but the whole thing was what happens when we're dying. Well, we call out to the Lord, and he helps us. And we trust him. And it is when our loved ones die, it's a reminder that we're going to die. And we pray they were ready with God, and we pray we'll be ready. And that's what it's about at our hymn. And I just have these other thoughts. When death robs us of a loved one, suddenly we're just left kind of paralyzed. It's not that we don't love God, but we love the person and they've been ripped away. And when our own death comes, and we're all going to face death, that's the last and great test of our faith. Because in death, there's fear, and we're out of control. It's in God's hands. And we do what David did. We call out to the Lord to lead us home to heaven. And that's where we're going to end the service, because that's what our song is about, calling out to God to bring us home. Okay? Would you rise and we sing, Precious Lord, Take My Hand.